Hey y'all, hey. This is your girl Morgan Renee tuned in for another story time with Morma. We are in the Immortal Life of Henrietta Latz. Yesterday I read chapters 4 through 7. Today I'm starting at chapter 8 and we'll see where we'll go. So chapter 8, A Miserable Specimen. In early June, Henrietta told her doctor several times that she thought the cancer was spreading and that she could feel it moving through her, but they found nothing wrong with her. The patient states that she feels fairly well, one doctor wrote in her chart. However, she continues to complain of some vague lower abdominal discomfort, no evidence of reoccurrence, return in 1 month. There's no indication that Henrietta questioned him. Like most patients in the 1950s, she deferred to anything her doctor said. This was a time when benevolent deception was a common practice. Doctors often withheld even the most fundamental information from their patients, sometimes not giving them any diagnosis at all. They believed it was best not to confuse or upset patients with frightening terms they might not understand, like cancer. Doctors knew best, and most patients didn't question that, especially black patients in public wards. This was 1951 in Baltimore. Segregation was law, and it was understood that black people didn't question white people's professional judgment. Many black patients was just glad to be getting treatment since discrimination in hospitals was widespread. There's no way of knowing whether or how Henrietta's treatment would have differed if she'd been white. According to Howard Jones, Henrietta got the same care any white patient would have. The biopsy, the radium treatment, and radiation were all standard for the day. But several studies have shown that black patients were treated and hospitalized at later stages of their illness than white patients. And once hospitalized, they got fewer pain medications and had higher mortality rates. All we can know for sure are the facts of Henrietta's medical records. A few weeks after the doctor told her she was fine, she went back to Hopkins saying that the discomfort she complained about last time was now an ache in both sides. But the doctor's entry was identical to the 1 week earlier. No evidence of reoccurrence, return in 1 month. 2.5 weeks later, Henrietta's abdomen hurt and she could barely urinate. The pain made it hard to walk. She went back to Hopkins where a doctor passed a catheter to empty her bladder, then sent her home. 3 days later, when she returned complaining once again of pain, a doctor pressed on her abdomen and felt a stony, hard mass. An x-ray showed that it was attached to her pelvic wall, nearly blocking her urethra. The doctor on duty called for Jones and several others who treated Henrietta. They all examined her and looked at the x-ray. Inoperable, they said. On the weeks after the previous entry declared her healthy, one of the doctors wrote, "The patient looks chronically ill. She is obviously in pain." You think? He sent her home to bed. Sadie would later describe Henrietta's decline like this. Henrietta didn't fade away, her looks, her body, it didn't just fade. Like some people be sick in bed with cancer and they look so bad, but she didn't. The only thing you could tell was in her eyes. Her eyes were telling you that she wasn't going to be alive no more. Lord. Is it? Well, it's okay, because I'll upload it on my YouTube, because I'm recording on multiple devices, so I try to read louder. Until that point, no one except Sadie, Margaret, and Day knew Henrietta was sick. Then, suddenly, everyone knew. When Day and the cousins walked home from Sparrow's Point after each shift, they could hear Henrietta from a block away wailing for the Lord to help her. When Day drove her back to Hopkins for x-rays the following week, stone-hard tumors filled the inside of her abdomen, one on her uterus, one on each kidney, and on her urethra. Just a month after, a note in her medical record said she was fine, another doctor wrote, "In view of the rapid extension of the disease process, the outlook is quite poor. The only option," he said, "was further irradiation in the hopes that we may at least relieve her pain." Henrietta couldn't walk from the house to the car, but either Day or one of the cousins managed to get her to Hopkins every day for radiation. They didn't realize she was dying. They thought the doctors were still trying to cure her. Each day, Henrietta's doctors increased her dose of radiation, hoping it would shrink the tumors and ease the pain until her death. Each day, the skin of her abdomen burned blacker and blacker, and the pain grew worse. On August 8th, just 1 week after her 31st birthday, Henrietta arrived at Hopkins for her treatment, but this time she said she wanted to stay. Her doctor wrote, "Patient has been complaining bitterly of pain and she seems genuinely miserable. She has to come in for a considerable distance and it is felt that she deserves to be in the hospital where she can be better cared for." After Henrietta checked into the hospital, a nurse drew blood and labeled the vial colored, then stored it in case Henrietta needed transfusions later. A doctor put Henrietta's feet in stirrups once again to take a few more cells from her cervix at the request of George Guy, who wanted to see if a second batch would grow like the first. But Henrietta's body had become so contaminated with toxins normally flushed from the system in urine, her cells died immediately in the culture. During Henrietta's first few days in the hospital, the children came with Day to visit her, but when they left, she cried and moaned for hours. Soon the nurses told Day he couldn't bring the children anymore because it upset Henrietta too much. After that, Day would park the Buick behind Hopkins at the same time each day and sit on a little patch of grass on Wolf Street with the children right under Henrietta's window. She'd pull herself out of bed, press her hands and face to the glass, and watch her children play on the lawn. But within days, Henrietta couldn't get herself to the window anymore. Her doctors tried in vain to ease her suffering. Demerol does not seem to touch the pain, one wrote, so he tried morphine. This doesn't help too much either. He gave her Dromarin. This stuff works, he wrote, but not for long. Eventually, one of her doctors tried injecting pure alcohol straight into her spine. Alcohol injections ended in failure, he wrote. New tumors seemed to appear daily on her lymph nodes, hip bones, labia, and she spent most days with a fever up to 105. Her doctor stopped the radiation treatment and seemed as defeated by the cancer as she was. Henrietta is still a miserable specimen, they wrote. She groans. She is constantly nauseated and claims she vomits everything she eats. Patient acutely upset, very anxious. As far as I can see, we are doing all that can be done. There is no record that George Guy ever visited Henrietta in the hospital or said anything to her about her cells, and everyone I talked to who might know said that Guy and Henrietta never met. Everyone that is except Laurie Aurelian, a microbiologist who was Guy's colleague at Hopkins. I'll never forget it, Aurelian said. George told me he leaned over Henrietta's bed and said, "Your cells will make you immortal." He told Henrietta her cells would help save the lives of countless people, and she smiled. She told him she was glad her pain would come to some good for someone. Oh, okay. So let me go back. So there is no record that George Guy ever visited Henrietta in the hospital or said anything to her about her cells. And everyone I talked to who might know said that Guy and Henrietta never met. Everyone that is except Laurie Aurelian, a microbiologist who was Guy's colleague at Hopkins. I'll never forget it, Aurelian said. George told me he leaned over Henrietta's bed and said, "Your cells will make you immortal." He told Henrietta her cells would help save the lives of countless people, and she smiled. She told him she was glad her pain would come to some good for someone. Okay, that's a he say, she say. Chapter 9, Turner Station. A few days after my first conversation with Day, I drove from Pittsburgh to Baltimore to meet his son, David Sonny Lax Jr. He finally called me back and agreed to meet, saying he got worn out from my mother showing up on his pager. I didn't know it then, but he made 5 panic phone calls to Patillo asking questions about me before calling. The plan was that I'd page Sonny when I got to Baltimore. Then he'd pick me up and take me to his brother Lawrence's house to meet their father, and if I was lucky, Deborah. So I checked into the downtown Holiday Inn, sat on the bed, phone in my lap, and dialed Sonny's pager. No reply. I stared through my hotel window at a tall, Gothic-looking brick tower across the street with a huge clock at the top. It was a weather-beaten silver with big letters spelling Brahma-Seltzer in a circle around its face. I watched my hands move slowly past the letters, paged Sonny every few minutes, and waited for the phone to ring. Eventually, I grabbed the fat Baltimore phone book, opened to L's, and ran my finger down a long line of names. Annette Lax, Charles Lax, and I figured I'd call every Lax in the book asking if they knew Henrietta. But I didn't have a cell phone and didn't want to tie up the line, so I paged Sonny again, then lay back on the bed, phone and white pages still in my lap. I started reading a yellow copy of a 1976 Rolling Stone article about the Laxes by a writer named Michael Rogers, the first reporter ever to contact Henrietta's family. I read it many times, but wanted every word fresh in my mind. Halfway through the article, Rogers wrote, "I am sitting on the 7th floor of the downtown Baltimore Holiday Inn. Through the thermopane picture window is a huge public clock in which the numerals have been replaced by the characters Brahma-Seltzer. In my lap is a telephone and the Baltimore white pages." Ain't that crazy? She in the same room that he was in writing this article. Let me back up so we don't miss it. Okay, so I figured I'd call every Lax in the book asking if they knew Henrietta. But I didn't have a cell phone and didn't want to tie up the line, so I paged Sonny again, then lay back on the bed, phone and white pages still in my lap. I started reading a yellowed copy of a 1976 Rolling Stone article about the Laxes by a writer named Michael Rogers, the first reporter ever to contact Henrietta's family. I've read it many times, but wanted every word fresh in my mind. Halfway through the article, Rogers wrote, I am sitting on the 7th floor of the downtown Baltimore Holiday Inn. Through the thermopane picture window is a huge public plot in which the numerals have been replaced by the characters Bromo Seltzer. In my lap is a telephone and the Baltimore White Pages. I bolted upright, suddenly feeling like I'd been sucked into a Twilight Zone episode. More than 2 decades earlier, when I was just 3 years old, Rogers had gone through those same White Pages. Halfway through the lax listing, it becomes clear that just about everybody had known Henrietta, he wrote. So I opened the book again and started dialing, hoping I found one of those people who knew her, but they didn't answer their phones, they hung up on me, or they said they never heard of Henrietta. I dug out an old newspaper article where I'd seen Henrietta's Turner Station address, 713 New Pittsburgh Avenue. I looked at 4 maps before finding out where Turner Station wasn't covered by ads or blow-up grids of other neighborhoods. It turned out Turner Station wasn't just hidden on the map. To get there, I had to drive past the cement wall and face that block and fence that blocked it from the interstate, across a set of tracks, past churches and old storefronts, rows of boarded-up houses, and a buzzing electrical generator as big as a football field. Finally, I saw a dark wooden sign saying, Welcome to Turner Station, in the parking lot of a fire-scorched bar with pink tasseled curtains. This white woman bold going over to Turner Station. To this day, no one's entirely sure what the town is actually called or how to spell it. Sometimes it's plural, Turner's Station. Other times possessive, Turner's with apostrophe S Station. But most often it's singular, Turner Station. It was originally deeded as Good Luck, but never quite lived up to the name. When Henrietta arrived there in the 40s, the town was booming. But the end of World War II brought cutbacks at Sparrows Point. Baltimore Gas and Electric demolished 300 homes to make room for a new power plant, leaving more than 1,300 homeless, most of them black. More and more land was zoned for industrial use, which meant more houses torn down. People fled for East Baltimore or back to the country, and the population of Turner Station dropped by half before the end of the 50s. By the time I got there, it was about 1,000 and falling steadily because there were few jobs. In Henrietta's day, Turner Station was a town where you never locked your doors. Now there was a housing project surrounded by a 13,000-foot-long brick and cement security wall in the field where Henrietta's children once played. Stores, nightclubs, cafes, and schools had closed, and drug dealers, gangs, and violence were on the rise. But Turner Station still had more than 10 churches. The newspaper article where I got Henrietta's address quoted a local woman, Courtney Speed, who owned a grocery store and had created a foundation devoted to building a Henrietta Lacks museum. But when I got to the lot where Speed's grocery was supposed to be, I found a gray, rust-stained mobile home, its broken windows covered with wire. The newspaper article where I got Henrietta's address quoted a local woman, Courtney Speed, who owned a grocery store and had created a foundation devoted to building a Henrietta Lacks museum. But when I got to the lot where the Speed's grocery was supposed to be, I found a gray, rust-stained mobile home, its broken windows covered with wire. The sign out front had a single red rose painted on it and the words, Reviving the Spirit to Recapture the Vision, Proverbs 29:18. 6 men gathered on the front steps, laughing. The oldest, in his 30s, wore red slacks, red suspenders, a black shirt, and a driving cap. Another wore an oversized red and white ski jacket. They were surrounded by younger men of various shades of brown and sagging pants. The 2 men in red stopped talking, watched me drive by slowly, then kept on laughing. Turner Station is less than a mile across in any direction. Its horizon line was skyscraper-sized shipping cranes and smokestacks billowing thick clouds from Sparrows Point. As I drove in circles looking for Speed's grocery, children stopped playing in the streets to stare and wave. They ran between matching red brick houses and past women hanging fresh laundry, following me as their mother smiled and waved too. I drove by the trailer with the men out front so many times they started waving at me with each pass. I did the same with Henrietta's old house. It was a unit in a brown brick building divided into 4 homes with a chain-link fence, several feet of grass out front, and 3 steps leading up to a small cement stoop. A child watched me from behind Henrietta's old screen door, waving and playing with a stick. I waved back at everyone and feigned surprise each time the group of children following me appeared on various streets grinning, but I didn't stop and ask for help. I was too nervous. The people at Turner Station just watched me, smiling and shaking their heads like, what's that young white girl doing driving around in circles? Finally, I saw the new Shiloh Baptist Church, which the newspaper article had mentioned as the site of community meetings about Henrietta Lacks Museum, but it was closed. As I pressed my face to the tall glass out front, a black Tanner car pulled up, and a smooth, handsome man in his 40s jumped out with gold-tinted glasses, black suit, black beret, and the keys to the church. He slid his glasses to the end of his nose and looked me over, asking if I needed help. I told him why I was there. Never heard of Henrietta Lacks, he said. Not many people have, I said, and told him I read that someone had hung a plaque in Henrietta's honor at Speed's grocery. Oh, Speed? He said, suddenly all smiles and a hand on my shoulder. I could take you to Speed's. He told me to get in my car and follow him. Everyone on the street waved and yelled as we passed. Hi, Reverend Jackson. How you doing, Reverend? He nodded and yelled right back. How you doing? God bless you. Just 2 blocks away, we stopped in front of that great trailer with the 4 men out front, and the Reverend jammed his car in the park, waiting for me to get out. The cluster of men on the steps smiled, grabbed the pastor's hand, and gave it 2 handshakes, saying, Hey, Reverend, you brought a friend? Yes, I did, he told them. She's here to talk to Miss Speed. The one in red pants and red suspenders, who turned out to be Speed's older son, Keith, said she was out, and who knew when she'd be back, so I may as well grab a seat on the porch with the boys and wait. As I sat down, the man in the red and the white ski jacket smiled a big, bright smile, then told me he was her son, Mike. Then they were her sons Cyrus and Joe and Tyrone. Every man on that porch was her son. So nearly every man that walked into the store, pretty soon I counted 15 sons and said, wait a minute, she got 15 kids? Oh, Mike yelled, you don't know Mama Speed, do you? Oh, I look up to Mama. She tough. She keep turning station in line, boy. She fears no man. The men on the porch all nodded and said, that's right. Don't you get scared if anybody come in here try to attack Mama when we're not around, Mike said, because she'll scare them to death. Speed's son let out a chorus of amens as Mike told a story, saying, this man came in the store once yelling, I'm going to come across that counter and get you. I was hiding behind Mama, so I was scared. And do you know what Mama did? She rocked her head and raised up them arms and said, come on. If you think you crazy, you just try it. Mike slapped me on the back and all the sons laughed. At that moment, Courtney Speed appeared at the bottom of the steps, her long black hair piled loose on her head, strands hanging in wisps around her face, which was thin, beautiful, and entirely ageless. Her eyes were soft brown with a perfect halo of sea blue around the edges. She was delicate, not a hard edge on her. She hugged the grocery bag to her chest and whispered, but did that man jump across the counter at me? Mike screamed and laughed so hard he couldn't answer. She looked at him, calm and smiling. I said, did that man jump? No, he did not, Mike said, grinning. That man didn't do nothing but run. That's why Mama got no gun in the store. She don't need one. I don't live by the gun, she said, then turned to me and smiled. How you doing? She walked up the stairs into the store, and we all followed. Mama, he said, Pastor brought this woman in here. She's Miss Rebecca, and she's here to talk to you. Courtney Speed smiled a beautiful, almost bashful smile, her eyes bright and motherly. God bless you, sweetie, she said. Inside, flattened cardboard boxes covered most of the floor, which was worn from years of foot traffic. Shelves lined each wall, some bare, others stacked with Wonder Bread, rice, toilet paper, and pig's feet. On one, Speed had piled hundreds of editions of the Baltimore Sun dating back to the 1970s when her husband died. She said she'd given up replacing the windows each time someone broke in because they just do it again. She hung handwritten signs on every wall of the store, one for the Sam the Man Snowballs, others for sports clubs, church groups, and free GED and adult literacy classes. She had dozens of spiritual sons who she treated no different than her 6 biological sons. And when any child came in to buy chips, candy, or soda, Speed made them calculate how much change she owed them. They got a free Hershey's Kiss for each correct answer. Speed started straightening the items on her shelves so each label faced out and yelled over her shoulder at me, How did you find your way here? I told her about the 4 maps, and she threw a box of lard onto the shelf. Now we got to get the 4 map syndrome. She said. They keep trying to push us off the earth, but God won't let them. Praise the Lord, he brings us the people we really need to talk to. She wiped her hands on her white shirt. Now that he brought you here, what can I do for you? I am hoping to learn about Henrietta Lacks, I said. Courtney gasped, her face suddenly ashen. She took several steps back and hissed, You know Mr. Cofield? Did he send you? I was confused. I told her I'd never heard of Cofield and no one had sent me. How did you know about me? She snapped, backing away further. I pulled the old crumpled newspaper article from my purse and handed it to her. Have you talked to the family? She asked. I'm trying, I said. I talked to Deborah once, and I was supposed to meet with Sonny today, but he didn't show up. She nodded like I knew it. I can't tell you anything until you got the support of the family. I can't risk that. What about the plaque you got for the museum? I asked. Can I see that? It's not here, she snapped. Nothing's here because bad things happen around all that. She looked at me for a long moment, then her face softened. She took my hand in one of hers and touched my face with the other. I like your eyes, she said. Come with me. She hurried out the door and down the stairs to her old brown station wagon. A man sat in the passenger seat staring straight at the road as if the car were moving. He didn't look up as she jumped in, saying, "Follow me." We drove through Turner Station to the parking lot of the local public library. As I opened my car door, Courtney appeared, clapping, grinning, and bouncing on her tiptoes. Words erupted from her. "February 1st is Henrietta Lacks Day here in Baltimore," she said. "This February 1st is going to be the big kickoff event here at the library. We're still trying to put a museum together, even though the Caulfield situation did cause so many problems," terrified Deborah. "We were supposed to be almost done with the museum by now. We were so close before all that horribleness, but I'm glad he sent you," she said, pointing to the sky. "This story just got to be told. Praise the Lord. People got to know about Henrietta." "Who's Caulfield?" I asked. She cringed and slapped her hand over her mouth. I really can't talk until the family says it's okay," she said, then grabbed my hand and ran into the library. "This is Rebecca," she told the librarian, bouncing on her toes again. "She's writing about Henrietta Lacks." "Oh, that's wonderful," the librarian said. Then she looked at Courtney. "Are you talking to her?" "I need the tape," Courtney said. The librarian walked down a row of videos, pulled a white box from the shelf, and handed it to her. Yes, give thanks." "I need the tape," Courtney said. The librarian walked down a row of videos, pulled a white box from the shelf, and handed it to her. Courtney tucked the video under her arm, grabbed my hand, and ran me back to the parking lot, where she jumped into her car and sped off, waving for me to follow. We stopped outside a convenience store while the man in her front seat got out and bought a loaf of bread. Then we dropped him off in front of his house as Courtney yelled back to me, "He's my deaf cousin, can't drive." Finally, she led me to a small beauty parlor she owned, not far from Speed's Grocery. She unlocked 2 bolts on the front door and waved her hand in the air, saying, "Smells like I got a mouse in one of those traps." The shop was narrow, with barber chairs lining one wall and dryers along the other. The hair washing sink propped up with a piece of plywood drained into a large white bucket, the walls around it splattered with years' worth of hair dye. Next to the sink sat a price board, cut and styled $10. Press and curl 7, and against the back wall on top of a supply cabinet sat a photocopy of the picture of Henrietta Lacks, hands on hip in a pale wood frame, several inches too big. I'm presuming it's the picture they keep mentioning. I pointed to the photo and raised my eyebrows. Courtney shook her head. "I'll tell you everything I know," she whispered, "just as soon as you talk to the family and they say it's okay. I don't want any more problems, and I don't want Deborah to get sick over it again." She pointed to a cracked red vinyl barber's chair, which she spun to face the small television next to the hair dryers. "You have to watch this tape," she said, handing me the remote and a set of keys. She started to walk out the door, then turned. "Don't you open this door for nothing or nobody but me, you hear?" she said. "And don't you miss nothing in that video. Use that rewind button. Watch it twice if you have to, but don't you miss nothing." Then she left, locking the door behind her. What rolled in front of me on that television screen was a 1-hour BBC documentary about Henrietta and the HeLa cells called The Way of All Flesh, which I've been trying to get a copy of for months. It opened to sweet music and a young black woman who wasn't Henrietta dancing in front of the camera. A British man began narrating, his voice melodramatic, like he was telling a ghost story that just might be true. "In 1951, a woman died in Baltimore in America," he said, pausing for effect. "She was called Henrietta Lacks." The music grew louder and more sinister as he told the story of her cells. "These cells have transformed modern medicine. They shaped the policies of countries and of presidents. They even became involved in the Cold War, because scientists were convinced that in her cells lay the secret of how to conquer death." What really grabbed me was the footage of Clover, an old plantation town in southern Virginia where some of Henrietta's relatives seemed to live. The last image to appear on the screen was Henrietta's cousin, Fred Garrett, standing behind an old slave shack in Clover, his back to the family cemetery where the narrator said Henrietta lay buried in an unmarked grave. Why was her grave unmarked? Fred pointed to the cemetery and looked hard into the camera. "Do you think them cells still living?" he asked. "I'm talking about in the grave." He paused, then laughed a long, rumbling laugh. "Hell no," he said. "I don't guess they are. But they're still living out in the test tubes. That's a miracle." The screen went blank, and I realized if Henrietta's children and husband wouldn't talk to me, I needed to visit Clover and find her cousins. That night, back at the hotel, I finally got Sonny on the phone. He said he decided not to meet me, but wouldn't tell me why. When I asked him to put me in touch with his family in Clover, he told me to go there and find them myself. Then he laughed and wished me luck. All right, we'll start there. Stop there. So that was chapter 89. I'll pick up on chapter 10. If you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go do so. It's my name, Morgan Myers, Myers. You'll see a red logo with a yellow M inside, which stands for my brand, More of My, which is a play on my name, Morgan Renee Myers, More of My. Because you're going to want more of my education, entertainment, all of that jazz. So go there, or you can type in Storytime with More of My. You can type in the name of this book with my name, and it'll come up. So go subscribe. You'll see some other readings that I've done in the past. I've read books. I've read Black Boy by Richard White, The Coldest Winter Ever, and No Disrespect by Sister Soldier. I just finished up. What did we just finish up? We finished up. Can I put it in the comments? Sure. Yeah. It's a lot of good reads on there. Y'all just gotta go check it out. And if you have any suggestions of any books you like me, I typically like to read books by Black authors, and this is actually written by a white woman. So here I am delving into what I said I wasn't ready to do, but I was open to, because there's some other books out there I want to read that are not by indigenous writers. So it's all good. But the focus is always gonna be Black folk and health. Okay, that's in gardening and self-sustainability, stuff like that. So I appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have a good rest of y'all day, and I'll be checking in with y'all again soon. Peace.